David, the presidential retreat north of Washington. Senior officials in the administration are saying that that is not true. So that's where that matter stands. Back to you, John.
Britt Hume, thanks for the updated information. Yeah, it bears repeating. There will be a lot of rumors, a lot of panic swirling around today. Whatever you can do to stay calm, gather your loved ones around them and just give them a hug is certainly is advice that I think is worth taking. There is clearly a catastrophic loss of life in the World Trade Center itself. Let's get an update now from our Rita Cosby, who is in the Washington, D.C. area. Rita, what have you found out?
Well, John, I just wanted to let you know I've been talking to FAA officials, and they are saying that they keep getting repeated reports of possible hijackings. Obviously, as you said, this is still very early on, but they're getting a lot of different calls from throughout the country. One report from Chicago, they're looking into the crash in Pennsylvania, which was a 767, a wide-body plane. They don't know if that is related or not, but they're getting numerous calls. It's obviously flooded. They said at this point, normally at this time of day, there are typically 4,000 aircraft aloft in the United States. These are international, domestic flights, a variety of ones, and these include military planes as well as private and commercial aircraft. At this point, there are only just a few hundred at this point because they have ordered a national ground stop as of 2 hours ago. It's the first time in U.S. history that they have ordered all U.S. planes to be grounded immediately. International flights are being diverted to Canada, and the ones that are domestic are being ordered to reach their destination as soon as possible. There are 450 airports in the U.S. that have control towers, and all of them have been told to alert their planes to hurry up and get in.
Rita, I want to go to Shepard Smith, who's on the roof of our building here in Midtown. Shepard?
And no, if you guys know about these fighter jets, have we already reported on the fighter jets that are flying now?
There are fighter jets, we understand, flying over Washington, D.C. Shepard Smith, again, is not able to hear me, but he is on the building roof of our building here in Midtown Manhattan and says that fighter jets are circling Manhattan.
We're standing back again on the roof of 1211 Avenue of the Americas at the Fox News headquarters, and we're watching as two fighter jets circle what is lower Manhattan at quite an altitude. Peter Blangiforti is an engineer who's up here, and he was first to see them pretty high up, I guess.
Very high up they were, and I saw one in this direction, and it went down around by the World Trade Centers, and then I saw another one coming from the opposite direction, and we lost track of that one. But they seemed to look like fighter jets, but they were flying very high.
Yeah, we can only assume that this is part of the security that's now gone into place. John, you saw the world. You were up here setting up.
Yes.
John McKay was up here setting up for this live shot when the first of the World Trade Centers fell. Tell me what was going on.
Couldn't believe it. Peter just said the tower just fell, and we were working and turned and looked, and
if we were looking from here, it would be the tower on our left side.
Yeah, the east one. Yeah, it just went into a huge cloud of smoke and dust.
So you're watching.
Yeah.
And then how long before the next tower?
About 10 minutes, I would say. We were just busy working and just, butterflies in their stomachs and just can't believe it's all happening. And then the next thing we know, we turn around, the other one's going.
Peter Blangiforti was explaining how the noise and the way it came across the city.
It seemed to have rumbled almost as if there was another large aircraft flying overhead, but really I think it was the collapse of the building, the volume of the explosion just coming across, just sound waves coming across the city.
The sound waves making their way up from lower Manhattan into the Flatiron District and up into Midtown, coming like a jet flying right overhead, I think is how you described it.
Yeah, just the rumblings of a jet sound almost, but it sounded more like a deep rumbling, probably from the explosion of the collapse.
It probably goes without saying at this point, as we pan back down to where the World Trade Center stood just a couple of hours ago, that communications in this city have become very difficult. There are people all over the world, no doubt, who knew people who were inside those two buildings. Some of the facts as they stack up, there are positives in all of this. In the first place, the first plane to crash allowed time for so many people, we would pray, to get out of those two buildings. And certainly before the collapse happened, there was time for a number of people to get away. If you are considering or trying at this moment to make a phone call into the New York City area or the Washington area, it's time for the good of the country to put the phone down and wait and rely on mass communications, because the people who are constructing what will be an enormous security situation now need as many lines as humanly possible. We don't have telephone lines on top. Our cell phones no longer get out. In the minutes after the first plane crashed, the phone began ringing in my house. It's the office, it's your mother, it's your father, it's your brother, it's your girlfriend. The phone lines immediately jammed throughout the city. There is a plea now for people around the world who may be watching not to use the telecommunication systems at this moment, because the people who are mounting this rescue effort need it. It was described by Peter Blangiforti as others as a collapse around a pole which stood. Peter, you were describing what looked like maybe a big support column. You can keep the camera down there. You were describing, still seeing something before the smoke rose.
Before the smoke rose with the second tower, when it collapsed, you just saw it almost as if one of the large girders or beams was going straight through the building and was the only thing left standing like a toothpick. And eventually that dropped too before the smoke engulfed everything else. But it was just a very strange, surreal sight.
Well, there are certainly reports from all over the city of what it was like in the minutes after the two towers were struck. Radio reports in the cab on the way here from reporters who were watching people literally jumping out of buildings. Certainly there was a massive fire and smoke on many different floors of the building. The size of the jet would lead us to believe certainly that a number of floors were wiped out almost immediately. And then the chaos to try and get out of that building. But certainly there will be stories of miracles as we go through all of this. And those people who were in that building, and after the first explosion happened and the first crash happened, word of people who got out. I was listening on the radio, broadcasting live just about an hour ago, to a woman who was in the second tower to be hit. She was able to walk down 92 floors in what she described to be a pretty controlled situation. 92 floors down the west tower of the building. She was able to walk without any chaos to give a radio report live. It's my understanding that literally thousands of people in the time before the two towers collapsed were able to make their way away from that area. Mass transit was certainly down at the time, but it's a quick walk to get out of that area. They had, what, a good 45 minutes, Ann Woolsey, to begin to make their way to the north. In Midtown right now, I was looking over this building and down into, in fact, I'm doing so right now. I'm looking down onto 47th Street, right below us. This to my right here, no, you don't have to, you can't see it from there, I don't believe. Maybe you can see Times Square over here. You can't. This is Times Square right below me. This is a scene right now at 11:15 in the morning, at 11:15, when this would be a sea of tourists on a spectacular day in Manhattan, and instead sirens echo across Manhattan, and that is the TKTS stand. I believe you're looking at that now. You're not able to see that, are you? The TKTS stand, can you see it on the lens? We can't. Pan back down to where the World Trade Center
numb shock all over this city and all across America. If you're watching us now, you're looking at the lower end of Manhattan where the World Trade Center once stood. It is gone this morning, obliterated after two strikes in coordinated attacks from airliners, one of them apparently hijacked from American Airlines. We are going to be getting a news conference from American Airlines in about 15 minutes. In the meantime, an Arabic newspaper, a fairly authoritative source, the editor of that London-based newspaper, says bin Laden, Osama bin Laden, the Saudi-born, now exiled to Afghanistan rebel leader, Osama bin Laden, according to this newspaper editor, warned 3 weeks ago that he would attack American interests, and he promised a very big one. Now, we cannot yet attribute this to Osama bin Laden. However, that was the promise from this fairly authoritative London newspaper.
Well, John, certainly sources that I have talked to this morning, terrorist experts say this has the signature of Osama bin Laden, that he has the money, the network, the ability to carry out this type of coordinated attack. And let me point out that in the East African bombing terrorist trial here in New York City of the bombing of the two embassies in East Africa, that 3 of the alleged co-conspirators, one is now in jail, 2 are in jail, one's in jail, 2 cooperated for the United States government at the trial. They had pilot's licenses. and they can fly airplanes. So I'm sure investigators right now are trying to figure out a possible scenario. Were these planes hijacked by bin Laden people? Did they rush up to the cockpit? You don't need a gun. You can use burst in, several of them, and strangle the pilots or something, and then take over the controls of an airplane near the last minute while you're flying, and divert the plane and smash it right into the World Trade Center towers or in the Pentagon. Clearly, that is a scenario that I would think that investigators are trying to go on right now to try and figure out exactly what happened, who is responsible for this horrible act. And I also think that we have now entered a new era, clearly a day of infamy. That we are not, in this country, clearly immune.
September 11th, 2001, you're going to remember this day for a long time, and a lot of things in this country will change as a result of what you're seeing on your screen now. Not all of the chaos, perhaps the worst of it in terms of loss of life, but not all of the chaos is taking place in Manhattan. Washington, D.C. also has been under attack. U.S. airplane apparently hijacked as well, slamming into the outside wall of the outer ring of the Pentagon. Our David Schuster is there and has an update for us. David?
John, we have the eyewitnesses describing it as a U.S. airplane at approximately 9:40 this morning, approaching National Airport from a strange approach. The eyewitnesses claiming that it then slammed into the south side of the Pentagon. We've just spoken with a U.S. Air spokesperson, Rick Weintraub, who says that all of their aircraft, commercial aircraft, have been accounted for, and says that they are unaware of any one of their planes involved in this incident. So this may be a case of an eyewitness misreading the markings on the plane, but we can confirm for you that there is a large gaping 50-foot hole on the E-ring of the south side of the Pentagon near the helipad. We're getting reports from Arlington, formerly Arlington Hospital, which is now an Ananova Hospital, that injured are being taken there. The Pentagon has been evacuated. The smoke is still pretty thick here in the Pentagon, even on our side, the north side of the Pentagon, and most of the 23,000 employees here at the Pentagon have been evacuated. But again, we do not have confirmation on the which commercial airliner may have been involved in this particular incident at the Pentagon. U.S. Air says that it was not one of their aircraft, that perhaps the red markings that an eyewitness saw might belong to American or Southwest, or American or one of the commuter airlines that fly in a national airport, which is just a few miles away. But again, we are confirming that an counterintelligence source is confirming that it was a commercial aircraft that slammed into the Pentagon this morning. There's no indication yet on the number of injuries or those killed. Some initial reports are that some Arlington hospitals are being flooded with injuries. There were dozens of fire trucks and ambulances that were streaking towards the Pentagon at approximately 9:45 this morning, and most of the employees here heading out of the building, and most of them are in fact now gone. But you can hear the sirens still throughout the Pentagon hallways. Smoke still pretty thick here on this north side. It is worth noting, though, that perhaps this incident could have been worse. There are five concentric rings on the Pentagon, and the one that was struck on the south side by the helipad, which is where officials land their helicopters and whatnot, is the E-ring, and apparently there's a large gaping hole. This particular ring is sort of the offices of senior military personnel, but again, no indications about the number of injuries, the number of killed, but one would presume that if the eyewitnesses were correct, and there's several eyewitnesses of some type of commercial aircraft, perhaps as large as a 737, that there would be numerous fatalities involved in this incident, and still the aftermath still being felt here at the Pentagon. The entire area shut down. Traffic has been blocked on 395 and 110, the main highways near the Pentagon, and smoke is still pretty thick coming out of the Pentagon at this hour. John?
David, you mentioned that eyewitness report that called it a U.S. airplane, and as you noted, U.S. Air is saying their plane was not involved. Now, we are just getting a confirmation from American Airlines that a second airplane of theirs apparently was hijacked, Flight 77 from Dulles Airport in Virginia to Los Angeles. It had 54 passengers on board. That may be the plane that went down outside the Pentagon. American Airlines once again is confirming that it lost 2 planes today in apparent hijackings. The first one, Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles, 81 passengers on board, and that apparently was the first plane of 2 that slammed into the World Trade Center. That first one shortly before 9 o'clock this morning Eastern Time. A second plane also slamming into the World Trade Center. Both towers of the Trade Center caught fire, and eventually both of them crumbled and collapsed. You can still see the cloud of dust and smoke that is hovering over lower Manhattan. Fires are continuing to burn.